Hello, my name's Jack Blade. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing part 2 of our logistics guide. And class is about to start, so I hope you don't mind that I just drop in.
Cool. No doubt.
Bean gave me some feedback. Commenters, you have been insanely active and super supportive, and I've gotten some good feedback from you guys too. Number one, stop jittering about with the camera. So I'm gonna try my best to not do that and be a little bit smoother with that. Now, we are getting into episode 2, or part 2. What does that mean? First of all, if this is your first time hearing of this or seeing this, go back and watch the first one, or nothing we talk about in this episode or any of the future ones will make any sense. The first one is very much a primer and super important for you to understand the context of the logistics methodology that I detail in this mini-series. So thank you for checking that out. We're not going anywhere. We'll wait for you. Are you back? Okay, good. Let's go. When I'm saying that the first video is super important, that is not a joke. Even if you are an advanced player or you have a lot of experience with either Satisfactory or logistics and management games and stuff like that in general, doesn't matter. Go back and check it out, because you need to understand these things for you to make sense of what we're doing today, which is the planning step 1 and step 2. Let's see what we can get into, because I really want to talk. I want to get into this video so bad, but I first need to give credit where credit is due. You guys showed up in force. On video, right now, I'm popping up some comments from the first video that were really encouraging. That makes me very much feel like I'm moving in the right direction with these videos, and motivates me to really work hard to get the next two, like number 2, 3, and 4 out. So thank you so much. Your engagement is what enabled me to do these longer deep dive videos. The YouTube algorithm is really harmful if you have longer videos like this that just no one watches, likes. Like it's the engagement that is so important. So if you want to see more, like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. That's a really important one, as much as possible, so I can make more of this kind of stuff for you and really dive deep into some of the mechanics. While the last video was very much a primer for all of this, now we get into the meat and potatoes. We're getting into the process of all of this. So planning part 1. We need to know where the junctions and the highways and the main lines are going to go. And with that, we need to take a very close look at a couple of examples here. Because what we're planning for when we're planning this kind of stuff, or when we're planning a factory, in reality, what you need to plan isn't like how many machines do I need. Like, that's a part of it, of course. But the real number that you need to find out is what is the capacity needed. Mostly in terms of space, but also in terms of like belts, trains, drones, pipes, like whatever you're using in terms of logistics layers. So I want to show you a couple of examples of what happens when you plan a little bit too tight, too little space, and what happens when you have a little bit too much space. So let's check that out. We are here in my Let's Play world, where I record the Ultimate Let's Play series, and this is the first city that deals with phase 1 and phase 2 construction. And it very much has a few of these issues. And we're going to first look underneath here in the central processing, in the central tower there, that hasn't been built up entirely yet. If we're looking underneath here, you can see there's like a lot of logistics going on. And what you can see when we go in here, boom, is that when it comes to how tight it is with the ceiling, it becomes very tight very quickly. And there's no more apparent issue for this than over here, where I definitely have too little space for what I wanted to fit into this. So this is a mistake I've made on my part, where I didn't plan for enough space when I made this factory. But there, like I said, can also be the other way around, where you plan too much space and it wastes space instead. You want to have a nice middle ground. Where is that? And here we have that second area where you can see I have a big platform built out here, but ultimately there's only one truck stop over here for my little tractor that brings in coal. And not really necessary. Like I planned to have all of this go up here and also be collected and like driven in with tractors. That never really was made, but as a result I also used like 5 times more space than I need for a single tractor. So in this case I definitely wasted space, because there's no plans on expanding this, there's no plans on changing this around. This is just what it looks like, and this is a very big waste of space, and it looks a bit silly. Generally you want this kind of middle ground where everything fits. It doesn't feel like there's a bunch of dead space, but at the same time it doesn't feel like it's cramped. The space is used but not cramped. And this takes a lot of experience, or a lot of planning if you don't have the experience. I could eyeball this because I generally know, and the eyeballing part is how I challenge myself because I've been doing this for such a long time. So then the question becomes, do you plan forwards or do you plan backwards? And the truth is you do both. When you plan your factory, you first need to know how much resources are needed, and that is done by starting at the end product and then working your way backwards until you see the number. Okay, I need this much iron ore, I need this much copper, I need this much oil, or whatever it is. And then when you have gotten there, then you can start planning forwards again by using the needed resources to look at, okay, but how wide does my main lines need to be, and like all that kind of stuff. So now we're going to be doing this, and we're going to be actually planning a factory and building it. Not this just in this episode, but in the end we will have one built. So what is going to be our factory and what will we be planning? Because we're going to need to plan out so we can actually look at what it's going to look like. That was super smart said. I promise. So the first thing we need to do is look at what planner will we be using, because you are going to need a planner, and there are multiple different alternatives to this. And the one that I started out learning was Satisfactory Calculator. Satisfactory Calculator has production planners, as well as the most important asset is the interactive map, where you have a map that can show off the entire world, every single resource node, every single artifact, where the world border is, where like the natural roads are. There it is such an important tool to have access to this map for when planning factories. And some people call it cheating, some people do not. Like, that's entirely up to you if you want to use it or not. But you can also then put in your saves into the website to change things. For example, if you have a lizard doggo that fell through the world, you can teleport that one back up using this map and stuff like that. Or you can delete massive amounts of factories. Say you've bricked all of the rocky desert with a factory, you can remove all of that with the Satisfactory interactive map on the Satisfactory Calculator. And you can plan your factories, you can just put in what outputs you want, if you have something that is a specific input, all of it. Like, I've made a video on this, I'm not going to go too deep into it. The second tool that we have available, or planner we have available, is Satisfactory Tool. And we have a bunch of different versions or like ways of using this. And this one is a little bit more complex, but it's also a lot more nuanced in terms of what you can give, like, or can produce. So you basically put in what you want, and then you can get a nice like map showing you how many machines and how much of what goes where and like all that kind of stuff. So yes, it definitely does work, and it's a really, really good one. The third and final option, and also the one we will be using today, is this Satisfactory Modeler. And in here, this is more of a, I can draw my own stuff. I can put in whatever I want. Say that I want iron ingots. I can say I want 10 machines making iron ingots. Then I get 300. I need 300 in, and I get 300 out, and I can then move that on and build up from that. This is the one we will be actually using today. And we will be building or making a very specific number of things. These numbers here are the ultimate output that we will have. And I'm going to, for those who are a little bit more advanced, I will not be using alternate recipes. I will not be using anything like that. And the main reason for that is I want to keep this simple and approachable for new players as well. So this is only base recipes at the end. And these are all the final outputs that we will be using. And the way that we can do this is we can draw it out in and just connect these up here, boop-a-doo, to this, what's called an outpost. Like so. And then we can right click on the outpost and click open. Ultimately, this will be our output from all of this for the entire adventure we have embarked on. And the reason why is because I want to showcase planning logistics for dealing with byproducts. I want to show logistics for dealing with liquids, and I want to show more some circular flows and stuff like that. So essentially, if you're able to understand and follow what we're building with this entire thing, you will have the ability ultimately to understand every single logistics process in Satisfactory, period. Like, you can take this and scale up and down and use for the beginners stuff, and you can use it for endgame stuff, does not matter, this will function. So how do we plan backwards from this? Well, first of all, we gotta look at the primary requirement in terms of input, and we can just follow the resources back here, right? So what it says here is that we need 360 crude oil and 360 crude oil to do that. So what we can do is we can just say, hey, oil, crude oil, boom, no problem. The map total is 14,400. That's the max overclock total, and a non-overclocked machine has a maximum of 120. And if you overclock a pure node to its max, it's going to give you 600. So let's look at what we will need for this. We will need 360, so I'm just going to put 360 here. Okay, that's not even the case here. I don't know why it did that. Oh no, wait, I know. Let's put 3 here. There, and then we can just copy this. And take this, and we can pull in and say, hey, you got the oil you need. So on a very simple, basic, level of this, we know that we need 360 to make our 240 plastic, and we need 360 to make our 240 rubber. But there's a little bit more to it than that, because we need to make 60 plastic over here, right? And we need to actually look at what is the total amount that we need. All right, so now I've planned out most of it, and this is just an overview. Let's go back in here and look, and you can see that it is split up. There's a lot of smaller machines, sections and stuff like that, so we need to look at, and that can be a little bit confusing. You can see the numbers here, 300, 600, 360, 360. Those aren't super easy, normal numbers to make it easy for you to split up. I'm gonna make it very, very simple when we're building this. But what we can very quickly do is out here on the left side, we can actually see how much of our pure or raw resources we need. So we need 2070 crude oil. We need 240 copper ore. That's it. That's all the resources we need. However, there is a different thing that we need to take into account here. And this is something most people do forget. There are two things technically. One, if I uncheck this one for the dimensional depot, we will see that we are making 300 polymer resin and 610 heavy oil residue. Those are our byproducts. We could use them to be efficient and make fuel and plastic and rubber and stuff out of them, but we are just going to process them and sink them. And when I'm planning in this kind of environment, what I tend to do is I go backwards. So we've planned this entire thing. As you can see, raw resource is on the left and we go towards the right where we have our end product over here. We are going to go the other direction when dealing with our byproduct. So take these for example, I will then go and I will drag that all the way over here. And then I will tell it to make petroleum coke over here. And then I will tell that, boom, to go into an awesome sink. Easy as that. That way it is quite simple for me to see what I am doing to deal with it. And I can very easily section out what what I've planned to do with things. Plus, and something that is really good when you look at something like this, is that you don't get confused about how much resources goes where. So everything in now is planned. You can see we have our numbers, they're correct. We also have the petroleum coke and polymer resin. They're being sunk for about 40,000 points per minute in awesome sinks over here. So this thing, I will extract it and it will be available on the Google Drive. So remember to go check that out. But with that said, we now have our production lines and everything set up and planned. We have this, and this for me is a very easy to-do list. So let's head back into the game and see what is our next step. Actually, instead of going into the game, we're heading into the map. We need to find a good place to build this, where we have enough oil and we have enough of everything else. What I want to do is I want to focus on this area up here in the north, because this has all the oil. There's like 4,350 or something oil. I will basically calculating with all of these, all of this, and all of these nodes. And we have all the copper, all the iron, everything we might possibly need in terms of resources around here. So we will be emulating that this is the area we're building in the actual game. We will be using the resource placement node, node creator mod, to set them up ourselves. But we will basically emulate 4,200 oil being available on 7 different nodes, because I can only place down pure nodes. So we will be doing that. We'll be having that. So ultimately we will be producing all of these parts, and we will be able to that is with everything. And these are for building, and this is the fuel. I have a different plan for, but yeah, we will be getting into it. The next up we need to look at what is the focus of your worldwide logistics, and we have 2 different alternatives here. Is it the factories, where all resource highways kind of orbit the factories first and foremost, which is an easier thing with mega factories. Like in my Let's Play world, like you saw Clearhaven, everything circles around the factories in that. All the roads, all the logistics circles around what I'm building and making. Then we have the split off corridor, where you have the world resource highway, or the resource highway, being the center focus, where you collect your resources and then you send them along. And then when you hit, okay, here's where we need to send in resources, here's the factory, boom. Because there might be some smaller, very important rare resources. Because the rare resources is what demands or decides where you place your factories. The rarer resources is okay, here's where the factory resource go. And then you like bring in the abundant resources from elsewhere as needed. So this is our two options. We will be going with this one because this one is easier. So for these videos, it's gonna be a lot easier for you guys to like take in and everything, especially if you're a newer player and that haven't necessarily like played up until end game or anything like that. And we need to also be looking at what the type of logistic layers we'll be using and how will be coming in. We will have to plan that out as well before we go ahead, because that decides how much space it needs. So basically, collectors, main lines, highways, we will all be using the Mark 6 Belt 4. We will also be using the drones for a much like for the setup of collectors, like long distance collectors, and then we will be using trucks for local collectors, and we'll be using trains for our resource highway. So the locals will then be using like different tiers of belts and pipes depending on what they need in terms of liquid, but of course we will be like distributing it like that. So what we need to look at is like, how much space does a drone port take? How many drone ports do we need? And like all that kind of stuff. How many machines do we need? And yeah, it's going to be a big thing. So we need to look at how much resources do we need to bring in. And for the keen-eyed, there is a different problem that we also need to like address there, which is power, because that's also a resource we need to bring in. And for those who paid attention, we will be bringing in an average net power, or what we need to be using is about 4,610 megawatts of power. Now we're not going to build a power generator factory, not going to build anything like that. I'm just going to put in more of the alien power augmenters for it. But that's something to keep in mind, that power easily spikes when it comes to builds like this. And the more complex and the more different layers and stuff like that, like you could probably half the amount of power used if we took out the computers from the plan. But we want to have all of this stuff. We're gonna need all of the things. We're not gonna need all of the power. But what we need to look at specifically is we're bringing in 240 copper ore and 2,070 crude oil. So we need to plan for that. How many pipes do we need for 2,070 crude oil? Well, based on how we've planned everything, we're going to need the full 7. We're going to need all 7 of the nodes to get the amount that we want for our production. So 7 pipes will need to be brought in. We will also need 4 belts for the copper. We also need to think about the output. So we're going to need at least 5 belts for the output, right? So that immediately puts us at 7 pipes, 9 belts. And then we also need to think about all of our byproducts. Now, how many byproducts do we have? We have 2 different byproducts. But if we look at how many different lines there are, we're looking at 7 once again. So 7 different lines of byproduct, which means that we need to take our 4 belts plus 5, that's 9, plus 7, that's 16 belts that we need to think about for the main line in terms of width. And 16 belts, what you might not realize is 16 belts takes up, and I kid you not, 4 full foundations. Because you can fit 4 belts on each. However, for each junction, and this is also something that people keep missing, and this is why we're doing this. If you want to do like load balancing, splitting, merging, curving, anything like that, you immediately need more. So at that point, the junctions probably need to be, let's see, we're probably going to 8. How much do we have here? Do we have 8? Yes. We have 8 times 8. So this is going to be the size of our junctions. This is going to be the size of our main line. So here's the thing. The reason why the junction needs to be so much bigger is, like, from a very, very simple standpoint, how much space it takes to do merging and splitting. Like, if we look at this is a merger. Let's change that to a splitter. Let's say that we need to merge and split a couple of things here. All right, so here we go. And this is just a, like, I haven't counted, I haven't done any math for this or anything like that. But essentially, this is like a mock-up of like a load balancer thing. So look how wide the distance is between these two just to be able to split two belts next to each other. I would need to move it over here to have a clipping belt running next to this one. Like, that belt runs here and it takes 2 steps over. Like, here is where it would be able to curve. So this exit would need to be over here, which means we need to put it here. Like, that's how much space doing the splitting and merging and balancing and priority systems takes. And this is the smaller stuff. Like, this isn't train lines or anything like that. The junctions need to be big. And then we also need to take into account that we're moving pipes along with all of this. And the way that we are going to do that is we're going to do that on top of everything else. So we will be bringing in 7 belts, and then we will also have 7 belts bringing out like byproducts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use verticality to not make this wider and instead make it taller. So in terms of belts and pipes, the width and the height that we're looking at for our main lines are going to look something like this. And as you can see, I've color coded them, which is super important, so I can see which part is oil that's coming in. And remember, we have like byproducts going out, right? So we're going to have 7 pipes of heavy oil residue going to processing and being dealt with and then sent out. And we also have to think about, like, okay, are these belts coming in or out? So as we know, 7 belts are going to be going and several belts are going to be coming. So I need to change up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these need to be going the other direction so that they go out with stuff that we are moving away. These are going to be our outputs. So I'm just looking at, like, what space usage might we need? How much are we bringing in? We're bringing in quite a lot of oil. We're bringing in some copper and stuff like that. And we also have to think about what are we processing anything on site, or are we moving everything to a main factory? So there are different ways of looking at that. And in terms of like using resources, if it's a one-to-one, then it doesn't really matter where you do it. But if you are processing something that turns into less resources, then sending it before you've processed it is a bad idea. You want to process it first and then send this smaller amount using drones or trucks or trains, because it means it's easier to guarantee that you have enough capacity to move it. So for now, we know that we need 8x8 for a junction. At the very least, we know that we're going to be needing 16 belts on our main line, and we're going to need 14 pipes, and we're going to be stacking them like this to make sure that we have the verticality, or at least close to. We might split that up a little bit, but generally we have a good indication of how much space we will be needing. So then we also need to look at how many trains, how much do we need in terms of this stuff. So to put it very simple, I have done the math, and essentially for a full pure node, 1200 per minute, you need about 3.333 recurring drones to move all of that using Mark 6 belts at a 5-minute round trip. So essentially, you don't need that many drones to move it, but we also need to think about other things. While we're using the belts and pipes for main lines, junction, local collectors, and local lines, we also have the tractors and trucks are going to be local collectors for feeding or processing, nothing else. And then let's see, we're going to be having the trains. They're going to be a primary logistics layer for highway, like for the resource highways. and then we're going to be using the drones as collectors to bring in copper ore. They're going to be like processed, and then tractors and truck might be involved. We might change that up because there's such a small amount needed. But what the drones will be needed for themselves and also for any potential trucks is they need to feed our fuel infrastructure so that they make sure that the fuel and everything is fed, which is why we're making the 400 fuel in the first place. It is to feed our drones and trucks. We also need to make sure that we think about power. When our power, like the priority power switches, where are they, why are they named, how many do we need, and why. We also need to think about wiring infrastructure to make sure that we can transfer power throughout our factory. And now that we have all of this, what I can do, very, very simple, I can open this, and on the right side, you can see it starts becoming a little bit opaque. I click here and I get a to-do list pop up, and I can literally just go like, hey, I am going to just type in very quickly all of the stuff that we've come up with here. So we have a little bit of a list here now. 16 mainline belts, 14 mainline pipes, 2 collector drones. Is a give or take, like we have to adjust that up and down depending on how much we might need to make sure that the machines are always fed. Same thing, 1 or 2 trains. Is that enough to feed the liquids that we need? 1 and 2 trucks, same thing. Is that going to be enough if we're using trucks at all? And then 2 fuel distribution drones. Is going to be needing that much? I'm thinking more along the lines that we might need just 1. And then we have to actually look at the power usage. 4,610 doesn't account for the vehicles using power. The stations are using power, the trains are using powers, and the drone ports are using power. So we have to also account for that. So with all of that said, it's more likely that we're actually looking at like 5,500 or maybe even more, maybe even 6,000 megawatts of drain. So we have to have all of that in mind when we're building this. Now we're taking a little bit of a break here in the middle, and I just want to say that for those who has found a lot of value and who really wants to support the channel and go above and beyond, you can support the channel on Patreon or become a YouTube member from $1 a month. Highly recommend Patreon because YouTube takes like half the cash and Patreon takes like a fraction of it comparatively. So either way, if you want to support, go right ahead. There are links in the description and everything. We are back on over to Satisfactory Modeler, and we have a good reason for this. Because what we need to take a look at now is we need to plan our production lines. So how big are they going to be? What we need to look at is, first of all, and these are my personal things that I call the steps of production. So you have step 1 through like 7 or 8, depending on how advanced it goes. But these goes into smelters to process raw resource. But so does these. So no matter how far into the game you get, these, in my opinion, or the way that I sorted, are still both step 1 productions. So what I will first do is I will look at the step 1 productions. I will look at all of these and see how much is there needed for each of these. And how do I section that up? Can I mash that in together into one massive production line, or do I need to split that up into multiple? So the way that it looks right now, it's more likely that I can split it up into multiple, but I kind of want to make sure that it's easy to follow, so I'm probably going to mash them up for the sake of like teachability. Eligibility, like readability, clarity, that's the name, that's the word I'm looking for, clarity, for everyone watching that aren't necessarily super advanced and can easily see where everything goes. So let's look at what we actually need. All right, so to put it mildly, we're going to build this. These are the machines, these are how they're going to be sectioned up into different production lines. And this is how we will be sorting things in our head when we build the different production lines. And basically, because of how, I would say, simple this is, like the production line is compared to what belts and stuff we have available to us, I will be using the like biggest possible belts at any given time. So I can have one belt that does the like local manifold in, and I've got one belt that does the like local manifold like local line out from machine group. So it's only going to be one machine group per thing here. So it's going to be somewhat simple to set all of it up. The only real thing we have left to actually plan at that stage is like how much space do we need for our like storage and overflow, like this kind of stuff. This section, how much do we need for this? And to put it mildly, to put it very, very simple terms, we only need one storage container and one like depot uploader, and then we have one sink taking care of all of it, because we're going to be using the same way that we've done here. We're going to be using a sushi belt to collect up everything and then spread out and stuff like that. So that's going to be quite simple. It's not going to take a lot of space. However, we have our plan. We know which factory we're going to build. Also, this statue says it's a confusing creature statue. I want to be really clear. If it's a confusing creature statue, shouldn't I be sitting on it? Bean, get off. You're in my spot. The final note here is literally just that when you're deciding how big a machine group is, how long a manifold is, it is decided by the highest number and lowest capacity stuff. So for example, you know that you can move like 600 cubic meters of oil in, but you are making, let's say, like in the end you're making like petroleum coke, which you get in massive quantities. You're probably not going to be able to make as long of manifolds as you would like to, especially not if you don't have the Mark 6 belts, because you're going to end up with tons and tons of petroleum coke and have no available space on your belts. So you need to shorten the manifolds and shorten the machine group to make sure that you can run everything on that machine group out in one go. Otherwise, you will have to do like split up the output, such as like, and I will do that with the byproduct of petroleum coke that we're gonna get in this factory, because the petroleum coke is gonna need 2 belts out, but we're only producing the petroleum coke in one machine group. So that's also something to keep in mind. Now, I want to thank everyone who's been here. I want to thank everyone who's watched the video and liked and commented and like done all those things and subscribed from the past video. And I just want to say, keep going. It's helping. You have no idea how much it helps, and you have no idea how grateful I am that you're taking time out of your day to do that. And I love you guys for it. With that said, the video is over, and if you do want to see more of this, show that with your engagement. If you want to have conversations about this stuff, I stream on Fridays and Sundays, so you can show up and stream. I'm on YouTube and on Twitch. You can find the links on my channel page. You can also join my Discord and have longer conversations and more in-depth stuff going on there. And if you want to support, you can do that on Patreon from $1 a month. So with all that said, thank you guys so much, and I will see you in the next video. Class dismissed.